We are back for the third episode of my interview with Pop, where we'll be discussing his teenage years. So, is there any introduction that you would like to do to this?
No, my teenage years were basically, I was through seventh grade. We moved from Columbia, Tennessee to Sullivan, Missouri. And then, so I was through, and I didn't finish seventh grade in Columbia. So mainly it was between Sullivan and Columbia, Tennessee. That's where I spent my teenage years.
Okay. And what was it like, having that drastic change in seventh grade?
It was hard. I had lots of friends. I was on a baseball team that I liked to be on. It was a nice town. It was a segregated town. And I did not go to any of my teenage years with black people. I did not go to have any black people in any of my classes until I was at the University of Missouri.
I haven't really asked you about that. Like, what was it like? Did it feel wrong to you? Or was it just so normal?
Feel wrong to me what? That
segregation.
I just didn't think about it.
Because it was just so normal.
It's what I grew up with.
Right.
Both Sullivan and Columbia were segregated towns.
Was it normal to just drive by a town and, would it say, this is a segregated town or, this is not?
No, you just knew.
Or was it just all of them?
Well, some were, some weren't. I'll give you an example. When we moved from Columbia to Sullivan, my dad hired one of the people that worked for him at Monsanto and had him drive. Dad and I were in one car, and then the driver from the plant was the driver. And when we went, when it was time, the fellow the black man who drove us to Sullivan was going to take a bus back to Tennessee. And my grandfather, Schaefer, was afraid that he would not be treated well at the bus station in Sullivan. So my grandpa went up and sat with him until the bus came that he was to take. That's just kind of what it was, and nobody thought anything about that. I'm sure there were some people, but it's just what I grew up with. I've had a lot of thoughts about that since. Like the lady who worked for us was our housekeeper. My mom caught her in the bathroom putting Purex on her hands, or Clorox, because she wanted to be white. That's just so wrong. I remember one of my classmates, there was talk of integration, and he said, if they ever let N-word go to school here, I'll throw rocks at them. So that's just not right, but that's just kind of the way it was. I think my parents didn't feel that way. I told you the story yesterday of the black picnic and the white picnic.
Mm-hmm.
My dad went to the black picnic. So it was just a strange time.
So before it was outlawed, did it ever hit you that it was wrong, or was it just
No,
because
no,
it was just everything you knew?
all that changed in '64 is the Civil Rights Voting Act. Because even though the Civil War ended slavery, there was still discrimination against black people. So that's just not right, but that's the way it was in a large part. And it just wasn't in the South. There were riots in Boston in the '60s to not integrate schools. So
Yeah.
just a weird time. Not weird is not the right word. It's just thinking back, it's how could we let that stuff happen? So and
Yeah.
it wasn't just in the rural area. It was pretty much all through the country. There was still not slavery, but there was still discrimination.
Yeah. And it's so crazy because it's like, I forget how like relatively recent all that was.
Yeah. Well, what happened is even though that it was illegal to discriminate, like there was one area in Mississippi, I think it was Mississippi, where they had voting restrictions that people just couldn't. They were like a poll tax. You had to pay. Black people had to pay to vote.
It's
That's
crazy.
illegal, but still, that's the way it was.
Wow.
That's the way it was back then.
That's crazy.
I said I never played on any sports teams that had black folks. It's just a strange, just an unpleasant time it was a great time for if you were white, but it wasn't such a great time if you were black.
Mm-hmm. Were they allowed to like fight in the war, or did they have to have their own?
Well, that's interesting. They didn't. They started. There was a belief among some people that blacks were not smart enough to be in the army, to carry a rifle. They were afraid
Wow.
to give them rifles. But so they came in and they drove non-combat things like big trucks that carried supplies. They were allowed to do that. Then toward the end of the war, they did allow them to fight and gave them rifles. There was this feeling there in football, the most complicated position is quarterback. They have to know all the plays for all the people, and it was probably not until the 50s or 60s that they would let blacks play quarterback. They could play other positions, but not quarterback.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy. Not a good time for our country.
So like what was it like when you first started, like when, there wasn't segregation? Like, did it feel weird or different, or?
Well, it didn't, because it as I said to you yesterday, I think, I said it a minute ago, there are no people, what's the right way to put it? I'm losing my train of thought. What was your question? Oh, did it seem different to me?
Yeah.
I went from Sullivan, where there are no black people in the town, to the University of Missouri, where there were still some restrictions on black people, but not very many. Like I was in a fraternity. In our fraternity, the national fraternity, the people who managed the whole like there's certain fraternities and sororities that did not allow blacks.
Wow. But it was more up to this sorority and fraternity rather than.
No. I think our fraternity was founded at the University of Alabama, And I think there probably was national discrimination. It wasn't up to the local chapter. I don't think you could pledge
Wow.
black people.
That's
I remember that there was a guy named, I can remember his name, Ed Taylor, nice guy, came to our fraternity to scope it out to see if he wanted to join, and he was not. People in the local chapter voted against it.
oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, yeah, that was quite a tangent, but it's something that needs to be talked about.
How do we get what was before that?
Um,
We're talking about. Well, you said that.
oh man, I think were you talking? No.
I think we were talking about the difference between Levitt and Sullivan, and our
Oh yeah.
so.
So, on a lighter note,
Yeah, almost anything else would be lighter.
so you went to high school in Just Sullivan, correct?
And where?
Just Sullivan?
Yes.
Okay. And had you kind of established yourself there, or did he still miss Columbia?
I still miss Columbia. We went back to visit in Columbia after being gone a year. So, what was your question?
What, like, did you were you able to establish yourself in
Well,
Sullivan,
yeah,
or
remember I told you we went to Sullivan every summer.
right?
A lot of I developed friendships coming in the summertime. But so when I went to school, high school, moved there, I knew quite a few of the boys.
That's
So that made it
good.
easier.
So, like, when you look back on, your elementary and beginning of middle school years in Columbia, as opposed to your high school, what did you prefer, like, just overall?
Well, when you're young and growing up, things change. I mean, you change when you go from 8th to 9th grade, and they're the gosh darn it, Jane, I'm having trouble with my thoughts. Sullivan was fine. My grandparents were there. I lived there, all four of them. That made it easier. I knew people when I moved there, and then through sports, I got to know almost everybody. There was one thing. Before, Sullivan had changed their schools where they, from the 8th grade on, you had the smart kids were put in one class, the not so smart were put in another class, and then the dumb ones were put in a class.
So kind of similar to, like, AP classes now?
Probably. There were no such AP classes. But I got put in the medium class because they didn't have any room in the other classes. So I guess they had a room they just didn't. I mean, I didn't feel just because I was in the middle class I was dumb, but it was kind of interesting because some of the people in the smart class certainly weren't.
Really?
Yeah.
And, like, what was the average high schooler like?
Oh, back then they wore blue jeans and white socks and lace-up shoes and shirts sometimes with the arms
Cuffed?
cut. Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. It was pretty similar.
Like, what was cool to do? Because, like, I know now kids vape and,
Vape?
yeah, like what's kind of like the rebellious thing that was a
Oh,
trend?
probably smoking a cigarette was probably rebellious.
Yeah. So what was the worst thing that you did when you were a teenager?
Well, I shared some with you yesterday. Let me just think if I,
There was the candy incident.
yeah. Was your question, what's the most rebellious thing I did? I
Yeah,
wasn't very rebellious.
that's good.
Not many people were rebellious. People minded their manners and pretty much did what their parents said, and teachers didn't put up with any guff. I had a teacher, I mean, this is so many, there was a guy, it's my 8th grade, I think, history teacher, and his name was Mr. Treadway. And the first day of school, he said he picked up these big oak chairs, like kind of like what Nana we were sitting on up there, except heavier. And he picked it up above his head, and he said, "As you can see, I'm the strongest person in this room." And Tommy Moss, who sat behind me, he's a bad guy but a good guy. Kind of looked, who is this guy? And Mr. Treadway was gone in like 2 weeks. They ran him out. And then I had another. We were given book reports in our history class. I think it was history, yeah. And we were sitting in those desks that have like a desk that has you sit, and then there's like a table.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we were given a book report, and when I forget who was given the book report, we were all looking to the back of the room because the guy giving the report, his name was Herman Payne. We were all watching Herman Payne, and then how did it go? Yeah, Herman Payne was given a report, so we were all looking turned. We were all everybody was kind of turned like this to see what.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed the next speaker was sitting behind me. I got his paper and slid it under his, because he wasn't watching me, so I slid his paper under his desk. So now he doesn't know that where his report's going to be that he's going to give. And so we all turned around, and there Mr. Taylor had seen me, and he put one hand on this side of my face and reached back and just slugged me in the face, and that hurt. And I never did tell my parents. They always said, if you get in trouble at school, don't tell us, because you'll get it again when you get home. So, and then I saw my algebra teacher do the same thing to another student in the algebra class. He just reached back and poleaxed him.
That would not be okay now at all.
You'd be thrown out of the school system
Mm-hmm.
if you did it now.
That's insane. Possibly put in jail, honestly.
What is funny now? We were, you know what study hall is?
Mm-hmm.
Well, our study hall was desks that had, I think, 6 chairs. And Randy Wilmot, who was a friend of mine, was sitting at my table. And the teacher for study hall, if you're the study hall teacher, you're not on the top of your game. All you're there for is discipline. Randy Wilmot had, those 12-inch rulers that are plastic.
Yeah.
Well, Randy was loading up pieces of paper, and he would wait for Mr. Trigg, the teacher, to turn his head, and he would hold it down, pop it, let it go, and it shot these spit wads on the ceiling. And Mr. Trigg couldn't figure out where they were coming from. Well, he just thought, here's how you find out who did it. You look and see where that spit wad is, and you go straight down, and you're going to find the person who did it. I mean, it's not like it's going to fly around and hit the ceiling like a whatever. So, in the study hall, you know what radiators are?
It's like the heater things, right? Yeah.
They were all around the walls. So Randy fires off another spit wad, and here comes Mr. Trigg looking to see who did it. And then it happened again, and then Mr. Trigg was sneaking up on Randy because one of Mr. Trigg's not characteristic, but if he saw somebody doing something wrong, he'd pull their chair out from under them. So you're sitting in the chair, and Randy's sitting there. He's just fired off another spitball that's up there, and here comes Mr. Trigg sneaking up on him because he's going to jerk the chair out from under him.
No.
And Randy picks up that Mr. Trigg is sneaking up on him. So Randy raised his butt off the chair so he couldn't, and he didn't know it. And he grabbed that chair and he thought he was pulling it out from under Randy. And he stumbled back into the radiators, boom, boom, first. And I don't think Mr. Trigg ever figured out who was doing it. I mean, how can you get mad at what did he do wrong? He just kind of sat up in his chair. So Mr. Trigg wasn't there. Mr. Trigg trusted me for some reason. When he got his paycheck, he gave it to me to take to the bank. So I'd walk to the bank.
Oh, wow. Every week? Or whatever?
Every week. And one time I came back without all the money, and somebody had miscounted. And the bank said they didn't do it. Well, my uncles owned the bank, and what they decided to do was, if their cash drawer was, if they were short, if it was wrong, if they didn't have the right amount, it would show up when they counted at the end of the day. But at the bank, the funniest one, I had a second cousin named Susan Schaefer, and she was a librarian, and Miss Lillard was a librarian, and she was wacko. She was truly wacko, and she didn't like to check out books and things. She didn't want anybody to bend anything or crease it.
She didn't want the students to read the books?
Yeah, and my cousin, Susie's second cousin, Miss Lillard was behind this counter, and she kept an eye on things, and right outside the counter was a place to put magazines to look at. Well, again, she didn't like people checking out stuff. And my cousin Susan Schaefer knew that, and she brought in a magazine from home. And when Miss Lillard was looking at her, she took that magazine and ripped it in half. And Miss Lillard went bonkers. I thought she jumped. She got on top of Susan Schaefer quicker than anybody. And Susan said, "Well, shit, can I tear my own magazine?"
That sounds like something Henry would do.
Yeah, like Henry would do?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, don't say anything to it. So it was, in retrospect, it was all funny. It was all fun. Mm-hmm. But that was bad. That was being bad.
That's funny.
Yeah. Can you imagine seeing that guy try to pull that chair out from under him and no resistance?
That's a great story.
That's a great story. Yeah. What else?
Okay, let me see. The next question asks, what is the best piece of advice you were given as a teenager? Like, is there something like an adult said, or not even an adult, is there just something like a specific phrase that you thought of that you kind of live by now?
Well, let me think about that. Maybe something will come to mind.
Okay. So the third question is, what was your first heartbreak?
Well, I probably what happened to Dad, because he you know, he was a great guy, just a fine man, good example, and then all of a sudden we found out he had polio. When I said we used to go to Sullivan for a couple of weeks during the summer. Dad would usually stay behind for a week in Columbia and then meet us, come and Sullivan pick us up and take us back. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
So the family went to visit in Sullivan, my dad stayed behind.
Because he was too weak?
No, he was. It's just he didn't want to take 2 weeks off in a row, so he stayed behind for the first week, and then after the first week he drove to Sullivan, picked us up and took us back, and the way we found out Dad had polio, we were in church, and Mom got a call saying it was an emergency. She had to go back to Columbia, and so I see my dad go from seeing him big, strong, virile guy, and the next time I saw him, he was in a wheelchair, in what they call, I think it was an iron lung.
Yeah.
And that was heartbreaking. And they tried to explain, when we were waiting, we were going to see Dad, go downstairs and see Dad. They took him out of he was in what was called a polio ward. They took him to a room downstairs, and then we came in to see him. But they wanted to explain what it would look like so we wouldn't be shocked. So that was heartbreaking.
How did they explain it?
He had this big thing on his chest that sucked air in and sucked air out, and when it did that, it pulled his lungs in and out. So they said he'll look just like a guy in a medieval movie when you got a chest protector on. That's how they explained it.
And you were 9?
No, I had turned 10. I was 9 when Dad got polio, and then I was 10. 2 to 3 months later.
That must have been hard.
It was hard.
Yeah.
Hard for everybody.
Did it affect your sisters the way it affected you?
They were so young. I was 9, so my sister Jean was 5.
Yeah. And then the other one was 3, right?
Well, take off 2, and then take off 2 again. And then, as I told you, my youngest sister, Julie, was born 15 years after.
Did his personality change after that? Like, was he?
I didn't. Every once in a while, when he got sad, he would get quiet. And his personality did change a little bit, but not entirely.
Yeah. So the next question, well, it's pretty redundant, but the hardest part of your teen years, that would have been it.
Well, it really wasn't that hard. It was, we had, we didn't have a lot of money. We never went hungry. So there was really, it wasn't that hard.
Yeah. The next question is, what was your best memory of being a teen? Like, was there like something really fun that you did?
Playing basketball. I really loved playing basketball.
I didn't know you did basketball. I thought you were really a baseball guy.
I played both.
Oh yeah. So the next question is just what was high school like? Just like not compared to anything, just like what was your general experience?
It was like pretty average. I mean, not. It was. I had fun. I had friends. I had a job. So it was pretty. I think it was calm. It was peaceful, at least for me.
That's not how high school's described now.
No, I know that. But you didn't ask me about
But
that.
no, that's funny. But what was I gonna ask? What kind of like were you a popular kid or were you like what kind of high school clique were you?
I would say I was in the biggest or the best clique, but not one of the most popular. I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't in that. Have playing football helped.
Yeah.
Um, my grades were average. Uh, that's a good question. I don't. I had. I spent too much time playing basketball and not enough time studying.
Yeah. What was it like with like was it normal for guys to ask girls out in high school?
Yeah,
Did you?
yeah. My good friend Vernon Dace had a deal. I remember there's a new girl who moved to Sullivan. Then she moved next door to us. And Vernon, my friend, wanted to have a date with her, but he was too shy. So he asked me if I would go. He said something to her like, if Vernon asked you out, would you go? Which is kind of awkward, but Vernon didn't want the rejection.
Huh. What'd she say?
I think she said no. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. Well, he did. He wasn't standing there, so he didn't get embarrassed.
Was he good looking?
He was probably one of the most popular guys in the class.
She said no?
She said
Wow.
no.
And then the last question for this section, it wasn't a very long one, but what were you like as a teen? Like, would you say you were like, I mean, I guess you've kind of already answered this. But were you like, what were like the main words that you would describe yourself?
Shy, really shy.
Really?
Quiet. Those are the two words that.
That's funny. I mean, I can see it. But it's weird to think of you as like shy.
Well, I was.
That's funny.
There were two drugstores in town, in Sullivan. And Burt's drugstore and then Becker's drugstore.
They would sell sodas there back in the day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And all the popular kids went to Burt's Rexall after school to get a Coke or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to go in that one because I might be embarrassed because that's where all the popular kids went.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. All right. Is there any other question that you want me to ask about your high school experience and like?
Oh, yeah. What would I have done differently if I had it to high school to do over again?
And what would you have done differently?
I would have studied more. I didn't make great grades, but I didn't bust my butt either.
What grades would you get?
Well, the grades I got were probably, my average would probably been a B minus, C plus, something like that.
Oof.
Not so good, huh?
No. What was your favorite subject? Were you more like math, science,
I like
or
math and science better
Ew.
than like biology. But math was, I did okay. I took a lot of math. If you took extra math, you didn't have to do science.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, I wish that were the case now.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, because then I would just have 2 bad math grades.
But
Wow.
that's what I do differently. I just didn't learn to study.
Yeah. It is kind of a hard thing. Like, there's definitely a way to do it and a way not to do it.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
And not waiting until the last moment.
Wait, what was like getting into college, what was that like? Were there tests? Was there testing to get into it, or
There was, but I didn't take any tests. I didn't understand exactly the process. I knew I was going to go to the University of Missouri, so I really didn't go through all the testing. And I mean, I did take a standardized test, but I don't think I finished it. I got upset, not upset, but I just didn't want to fool with it.
yeah.
But I could have done a lot better.
Yeah. All right. Is that it
Well, that's
for
all. That's
this
all.
section?
You tell me.
I mean, I think I've asked everything that I've thought of, but we can always record more if I think
We
of anything
can.
else.